Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun, and super excited today to have joining me Chris Wehbe, founder of Caissa, a business strategy business. And just tell me a little bit about this, Chris, as we kick it off.
Sounds good, Blaine. Thanks for having me on here. So at Caissa, we are basically a group of partners that help small businesses reach the next stage of their development, just having the owner step back and be able to delegate a little bit better.
And you know what? We're going to start with, just as always on Turning Point, we're going to go back and learn a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey as we work our way up to Caissa. And then we're actually going to dive in deep on some of that because, as you know, businesses are struggling right now, and having some help to guide them forward and actually help them get to that next level is so critical. Before we dive into that, though, tell me, Chris, where did you start as an entrepreneur? And just like, what was your first inkling that this is something you wanted to do?
Great question. Actually, as an entrepreneur, it happened before I lost my job. So I worked in oil and gas. I'm an engineer by trade. I came to North America. I was working in Europe. I came to North America to sell helicopters, actually. So that was my transition from project management and contracts to more of sales and marketing. And it was around COVID. I lost my job, but even before then, I was looking into how I could get into having something on the side, something that I could pour my passion into. And I was looking into e-commerce. I was doing a lot of research on marketing because that's always been a fascinating world for me. And as part of an oil and gas construction company, a project manager doesn't get a lot of exposure to the marketing world. So
Yeah.
yeah, I turned it into a bit of a positive point when I lost my job and I was in Canada, and I decided this is the right time to go out and see what I can do on my own.
So I take it you're not from Canada natively. So where are you from?
My parents are from the Middle East, originally Lebanese. I was born in Canada, but I spent quite a bit of
Oh,
time
okay.
traveling around.
Oh, okay. So okay, gotcha. I thought maybe you just immigrated here like around COVID time. So no, you've born and raised here.
Oh, yes. Well, technically, I was born, I left when I was around 8 months old with my parents, and I came back for
Okay.
university and then left again after, and then came back around 5 years ago now. So yeah,
Okay.
it's quite the relationship, a bit of a global perspective.
Well, yeah, and I actually want to dive into that a little bit because obviously that's going to change or affect where a lot of your entrepreneurial and experiences come from and all those sorts of things. And I just found it interesting. You came from Europe and you were selling helicopters. I got to dive into that because I got to figure out. I got to hear a little bit about like where you were and how that all happened because I haven't heard of a helicopter salesman before. So
Yes, it's actually a family-owned company out of Calgary, Alberta, and they're quite impressive actually with their global footprint. And a gentleman that I had worked with back in the day during my studies, I did an internship with Caterpillar, and we kept in touch. And he went from mining, he transitioned to the helicopter world, and he wanted somebody with a global perspective to come in and see what it would take to get a larger footprint in the Middle East or in Europe, somebody who speaks multiple languages. And from my perspective, it was interesting to transition from telling everybody about this exciting project that I'm working on that nobody knows about. As far as LNG project goes, it's not something you really talk about with everybody over a drink. But
yeah.
helicopters is it is it turns heads. People want to hear about it, and the exciting part is that you're involved with emergency medical services, with firefighting, VIP transport, oil and gas, just all these different industries. And it's a lot more exposure than being on an oil and gas project. So it was an easy decision for me to move in this direction.
So they're based in Calgary, but they're selling helicopters across the globe.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
um, oh, interesting. Okay, so I don't honestly know that much about helicopters. So, but this is it. I like how you sort of dove in on the like emergency services and all these things. This got to be a very interesting place to be. But then it sounds like you're also getting some sales sort of experiences with, I'm guessing, some sort of larger organizations, healthcare, like probably city, I'm guessing civic,
Yes.
state, something like that. And then also potentially some like high net worth or some businesses, I'm guessing.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much I can specifically mention about the clients that we worked with at the time, but yes, I mean, police services as well as large individuals, and yes, with high net worth individuals, it's definitely a go-to. But we also worked with emergency medical response teams, and that was across North America, so mostly in the U.S. Firefighting, heli skiing, lots of excitement on that front, and it definitely gave me the exposure of what it takes to close a multi-million dollar deal in the public space. So,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
and yeah, I'm a little bit fascinated about how, because a lot of times with the sales, you're kind of you've got a target and you're kind of going to the same channel every time, and here you actually had to dance around to some very different I'm guessing some very different sort of needs and especially processes to walk through to get to a deal. How did you learn and sort of navigate some of the differences between, like, yeah, we're selling to the city and I'm selling to that guy, right?
oh yes, it is quite a challenge, and the difference between selling helicopters and selling services or selling software is in the length of the sales cycle. So, selling a helicopter can take multiple years. There is a deal,
Mhm.
for example, that we worked on that I think, but I picked it up and it was already underway, and I worked on it for an entire year before it got closed, but had already been underway for a couple of years already. And it's a helicopter that wasn't even licensed to operate in Japan. And by the time they got the licensing straight, and to imagine a client that's so interested in having that specific type of helicopter in their operations that they're willing to reach out to governments and try to shift, their take on the aviation approval process. So that's a little bit different about how we work today with regards to selling services and software, where most of the time, unless you're selling a big ERP system to a almost like a hundreds of million-dollar revenue company, you're usually looking for a sales cycle that shouldn't extend over a year, especially an active back and forth. So that does give quite a bit of time to kind of wrap your head around how this specific client does like to be treated, what their approval processes are, who the decision makers are. So yeah, just having a little
Yeah.
bit more time there definitely makes the process easier to accommodate.
And so when you were selling also, I'm just sort of curious how, like, how were you sort of demoing? Like, how would you, was it all sort of like specs in that? How did you actually, basically take them up for a ride, or how did that all sort of work out?
Yeah, great question. So international companies would come in for visits. That was a little bit more difficult during COVID times, but the demo would be a little bit later on in the sales cycle, where earlier it would be, for example, on at a helicopter conference, and the specs are what really make the difference. You know, how well a helicopter operates, what it's meant for, how well it operates under hot and high situations, because the higher up you go, the thinner the air gets, and the
Mm.
helicopter makes has more of a difficulty operating at that height. So that's what the clients are looking for, and specifically for this helicopter, it was basically modifying. So Blaine, helicopters, I was surprised to hear about this as well, but you've got helicopters out there that are quite old, like operating from the 70s. And basically you change
Mm.
in the different parts, you can change the engine. Basically nothing can stay the same in the helicopter except it becomes a bit of a philosophical question. You know, what makes the helicopter a helicopter if every part of it has changed, but it still retains its original registration? And sometimes it can go from one country to another, and the registration changes, and all you have left is just the hull number or the equivalent of a VIN number. So it changes quite a
Mm.
bit. And in this specific scenario that I'm talking about, the helicopter sold to Japan, you're talking about a helicopter that, they own a helicopter and they'd like to modify it to switch from having twin engines to having a single, more powerful engine. And there are some benefits to having that. They were very motivated to do that because it saves them millions of dollars in terms of buying a new helicopter, and they are able to ramp up the operation of their existing helicopter as well as develop a fleet. of the same by buying helicopters with the double engines and switching them to a single engine helicopter along this line.
Oh, yes. You can see how complicated these deals can
Oh,
get.
yes.
And so, and I'm guessing because it's not like an enormous market, that's why you were, I expect, probably traveling all over the place. So now you're dealing not only with sales to very different types of organizations, but I'm guessing also very different sort of cultures and different regulatory everything.
Hmm.
How did you manage some of that? Because I know that's what a lot of businesses will face anytime they're trying to, open up in a new region. They're gonna face some of these same sort of challenges, right?
Oh yes, oh yes. And that the answer to that question, Blaine, I would go a little bit further back to the oil and gas days, where I was working with a European company, a French company. We had projects all over. We had projects in the Middle East. I've been to Iraq, and I've also worked in Russia. And while working in Russia, there was exposure to the Chinese market. And as you can imagine, you're dealing with all these different people. And I was in the contract space handling tri-party negotiations. So there's a lot at stake, and you have to make sure that you're not treating the person at the other end of the table in a way that they don't like to be treated. You know, some people like to be upfront.
Mm-hmm.
Russians, they like it straight. They want the truth. They don't want any fluff. Chinese people, they don't like to lose face. So it's important that whatever is being discussed at the table does retain their sense of, all right, we're doing business with people that respect us and that value who we are. In Iraq, for example, just a quick anecdote there that you shouldn't say no to a cup of tea. If you're offered a cup of tea in Iraq, say yes, don't drink it, but don't say no because it'll give a sense that you're not trusting, you're declining. So
Mm.
we actually had an onboarding program, an onboarding style program before going to my trip in Basra in Iraq, where they walked us through these cultural differences. So I guess that was a bit of an introduction there. And from there on, it was, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to know and to do some research about the cultures that you're stepping into. And it's always good to make a visit firsthand. I'm an avid traveler, and I love just diving in, not just seeing the top spots, but spending time living like the people in the country live. And that really gives you
Mm.
an idea, and the people you meet will give you an idea of what works and what doesn't in the specific location.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty fascinating because it gives you. I'm guessing a lot of that gives you such a good foundation on um, as you started to look at starting a business and the sales side and everything. It just sort of gives you a bit of that foundation. What it like? Let's go all the way back here to. So you were traveling, then you came back to Canada. You said to go to university. Was that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Yeah. So what did you take in university? How did I know I'm sort of backtracking here, but I'm curious how this all sort of connects together a little bit.
Yeah, great question. I like talking about this as well. I studied mechatronics engineering at the University of Waterloo. And it was we had a co-op program as well, so I spent quite a bit of time. I've worked at Toyota, I worked at Caterpillar, as mentioned. I worked at a salami factory for a while, implementing the Toyota production system. I worked in oil and gas and companies. Well, Air Liquide is I don't know if it qualifies as an oil and gas company, but when we were working there, we were serving oil and gas clients and as well as industrial automation. So it was a nice opportunity to get some exposure. And these, I'm talking about, the Caterpillar work in mining that I did was here in Edmonton. The work that I did with Air Liquide was in Qatar, where they had the World Cup recently. So yeah, that definitely gave me a bit of a global exposure. I'd say that's where it began. And I also moved around quite a bit as a kid. But the transition from Waterloo and engineering to oil and gas was quite strange, actually. I was looking for an opportunity to, uh, practice industrial automation in oil and gas, and that's supposed to take you down the instrumentation path. And it's very structured. It's not exactly what, now that I understand it, it's not exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for customized solutions, solving problems. Whereas in oil and gas, it's similar to the
Hmm.
helicopter world. You've got the specs, you've got to find the tools that match the specs, make sure that you're able to get them in the volume that you need, make sure that they integrate well down the line. And luckily, I didn't get an opportunity there, but I did join kind of a graduate program, and somehow I ended up in subcontracts. So I'm managing the relationship between a contractor and all of the subcontractors. It led me to kind of understanding how things work. I remember when I first learned what an invoice is and why an invoice is important and how to justify, that that work has been done. And it's great that
Hmm.
that has been so crucial to me, because today a big part of what we do at Caissa is helping our clients negotiate, whether it's with their partners, whether it's with new hires, and whether it's just finding an incentive to ramp up their existing team members' efficiency, or just aligning them with the company's goals.
You brought up, I think, one of the most valuable skills an entrepreneur can have, and I don't think all entrepreneurs necessarily take the time to craft it, but it's that skill of negotiation. Um, that is just such an essential tool in your toolkit. And it sounds like from those experiences you've had, like that's just got to be something that's just, ingrained at this point.
Yes, I'd say I'm a big fan of negotiation. I feel like I'd like to study it better. I mean, when I think negotiation and somebody that's setting the standard, I think about William Ury and the work that he's done and the content that he's created, the books that he's written, the problems that he solved on a national scale, and real problems. So I've learned a lot from his books, but I'd love to, I think he has a Harvard course that he started on negotiation. So I'd like to maybe take that at some point. I definitely, but I'm more of a kind of learning practically and then seeing how I can bolster that down the line. So that's a little bit further down the trajectory for me, I think.
Yeah, you're talking about Harvard. I remember when I was out of school, maybe a couple of years in my first job, um, and I had to go into a negotiation, and it was like a Friday, and I had to go in on a Monday and negotiate, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm 20 some years old. I'm like, so I remember on my way home, I stopped by the bookstore and I got two books. One was the What They Don't Teach You in Harvard Business School about
Hmm.
negotiation, and then the other book was the Harvard Business School book on negotiation. I thought, well, I'm getting both sides of the coin on this one. So I took them both home. I read them cover to cover. I made my sort of plan. And it was my first time going in and doing a negotiation, and felt like this all worked. Like it was not, I got it wasn't like going in to fight. It was going in to just go, okay, I want to make sure that I have my case and I understand their perspective, and we can come up with something that works. And it was my first sort of experience with that. And I'm like you, I should probably sort of kept up some studies on that over the years, but I think at least, somewhere in there were some ingrained tools that I've used over the last like 20 some
Hmm.
odd years of business to help get to deals where it's non-contentious. You're not trying to win, you're trying to make it a win-win, right?
Oh yes, 100%. And I love the way that you mentioned it. Like you realized, I think, by reading those books that you're not going to battle. You are actually going to find a good way to state what you're looking for and to better understand what they're looking for, and to kind of collect those bargaining chips, which are, all right,
Mm-hmm.
now that I understand what you're looking for, I can probably provide that. And so many times you go into the negotiation. I remember one of my best mentors letting me know, I love to think. I'm a chess player. Caissa is the goddess of chess players. That's the inspiration behind it. The work that I do with my
Yeah.
clients, I find that if I would have a superpower, I'm curious to know yours as well. But I would say mine is stamina, just persistence. Like I will, it might be a
Yeah.
subject that I'm not grasping, but I'm in it, and I will dive, and I'll come out. Like I'm not worried about losing myself in the complication. I'll pause a little bit. I'm curious
Yeah.
of, have you given that some thought, your superpower?
I don't, I think we share a bit of a common trait there. I just don't have any give up in me.
Yeah, I
I
love to
just
hear that.
don't. And I also am a bit like you. If I don't know something, I dive in. Like my wife says, like every time we go to buy anything, right? She goes, "You're just gonna like research the fun out of it." That's what she literally said. She
Yeah,
goes, "To
yeah.
research the fun out of it." But she just laughs because then I'll come back and I'm like, "Yeah, I know everything there is to know about, like, exterior lighting or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. And which one
And
which
you
one
got to
should we
figure.
buy? Well, it depends.
Yeah, exactly. I just had to install a switch, so we had a timer switch on the front of the house, and then I had to learn like a bunch of there's like electrical codes, and they only did this one like neutral wire up to, they started it on this date, but we don't have that. I like figure all this stuff out, and then I find the switch, and I'm like, well, this is like the one like Wi-Fi enabled switch that I can use with this old style of whatever, and figure all this stuff out. And I don't rush into buy stuff. Like once I know it, then I'm like, okay, I'm good, and I don't I'm not wishy washy. Then it's just go.
Yep.
But I have to know where I'm going first, right?
Totally, totally. And I wish, that's one thing that I wish they taught us more, whether in engineering school or in school or just in life. I remember like
Hmm.
there was a point at which it dawned on me that things aren't simple. Like that wasn't something, it wasn't like I started life going like life is difficult and I need to activate my brain to solve problems because nothing is simple. I
Yeah.
remember it like dawned on me at some point that all right, things aren't easy and it takes effort. Even like I remember whether it's like you said with the example of finding the right switch that works with whatever instrument you're using it with, or connecting a speaker to a TV and finding the right. And for it might start off as a simple request of I just want to connect the speaker to a TV, and who knows that it might result in hours of research if the TV is a little bit older or if the speaker is a little bit too new. But I think that's
Yeah.
it's definitely something. Just having that skill of being able to dig into things, I think that's a great skill for an entrepreneur to have as well, because that's all I've been doing, I would say, since I got started is you reach an obstacle and you research it until you can get past it. Otherwise, life has this way of just hitting you with whatever you haven't found a way to resolve yet. So you're not going to be able to get
Yeah.
past it until you realize how to really get over that bump.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of sort of my personality, like and it filtered into when we created Dryrun. It was just really wanting to know, like, not taking away some of those blind spots and knowing where you're headed and what you're doing, and planning properly, and not just flying by the seat of your pants, because it's just the business is too hard. It's too um, there's too many pitfalls, and too many places you can die.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's just sort of hanging in there. It's amazing how much I've there was a podcast I listened to. I'm trying to remember. I think it was the founder of, was it Bonobos? It was one of the, I think it was a clothing company. And I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact quote, but basically it was, he said, entrepreneurs never fail, they quit. And it was really interesting how, and that was a bit of his experience, was just like, you know, avoiding peril here, there, and everywhere until he finally got over the hump and it started to run. And for people on the outside, business is always, like, from the outside, so often they just look like they're ticking along, and that's what they want the public to think, and it's ticking along and everything's always going great, until suddenly they're closed, right? And also it's like, oh, those guys were open last week, right? um, and the fact is that virtually every business, I don't even care what size it is, there's always sort of this struggles and things going on behind the scenes, because it's hard. Margins are tight, the economy's tough, the market's tough. Like, there's always stuff, right? And it's like you said, just researching your way through and finding the right path, rather than just diving in over and over again, right?
Oh yes, 100%. And the funny thing about it, and it's another big part of being an entrepreneur, is just striking that equilibrium. Because we also can't over plan and over analyze. We've got
Mm-hmm.
they say that if your product is ready by the time it goes to market, then you're too late. So there's also, and I know
Yeah.
that dry run, the changes that you've been undergoing since you got started, and you've had my attention, I'd say for over 2 years now, because you were solving a problem that we were spending hours on every week. And I love to see, since we've been working together with the Dryrun team, you've managed to incorporate any of our feedback, and then the software gets upgraded, and then we're able to use it. We're able to kind of broaden the way that we're using it.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine that's not possible solely by good planning, but there's got to be like being
Oh no.
nimble with regards to how you respond and how you get things to market quickly, right?
Yeah, and like one of my other favorite quotes is when Mike Tyson said, "Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face."
Yes.
Because they're talking about, of course, you're going in the ring with Mike Tyson, right? They plan and they train and everything, and that all goes out the window. And there's such a balancing act between you can't get like just you don't get any traction if you just sit there and you're planning and planning and planning. You have to execute, right? And it's such a balancing act. And like we've made a lot of changes. We've rolled out a completely new build of Dryrun, and so much of it was for us. It was just simple talking with customers over and over and over again, and finding out that okay, we thought we were building for over here, but it turns out who needs us and who wants us is over here, and it's more complicated, and they're bigger than we thought, and they've got problems that are a lot more challenging than we thought, and so it for us is just constantly like short sprint, roll it out, talk with customers and test. Short sprint, roll it out, talk with customers and test, and getting into that discipline of just like you said, being super nimble, being very much like talking with our customers, but mostly really trying to understand what their problems are and finding a way to solve the problem, not asking, what do you want? Because if you ask what they want, you'll end up back in a spreadsheet at some point, right? So it's a constant challenge, and it's this push pull. It's always back and forth, and you have to be nimble and really, be able to be reactive, but you have to balance that out with being really proactive and thoughtful. And I think if you get too much to either end of the spectrum is where the dangers come into play, right?
Oh yes, and that brings to mind the next aspect that I would say that has been the best part of my entrepreneurial journey, and it's the survival part of it, which is the longer that you're in business, the more you understand what clients are looking for, what the market is looking for, the more runway you give yourself to pivot and upgrade your offering to match that larger segment that might be hiding right around the corner. And yes, I'm thinking like my journey with Dryrun, for example, it's nice to get along with like-minded individuals. Like I remember when I came across your book, we were facing the same problem, and cash is king, and we have this great business, everything is going well, we're growing, and whenever you bring growth into the picture, it becomes that all we need to focus on is cash and making sure that the team's happy and feeling fulfilled. And that transformation from, I was handling sales, we were working on some operations, we were handling the finance, but at some point it literally just became, if we don't have cash and if our people aren't happy, we're not getting anywhere. So that transition was beautiful, and that allowed me that kind of opened up my eyes to Dryrun, that drew me to the content that you had created. And then since then, it's been such a pleasure and I think entrepreneurs tend to find people that they align with, or that are creating the content that they believe in, that they want to bring to their audience as well. And that, I'd say that's the best part of it, is just finding like-minded individuals like that and staying in business long enough to not only, continue to collaborate with them, but to also see ways that the collaboration can kind of merge and offer another win-win.
And like you hit the nail on the head. Like the thing is, we're not you look as a business owner and an entrepreneur and that, and you go, okay, here's the market size, and here's the TAM, and here's the blah 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 blah, but the reality is it's like you said, is you're finding those like-minded people that kind of see the world the same way you do, that see that want to face the challenge kind of the same way you face the challenge. And that's hard to do. That's really hard to do. We've tried different ways to do that. And at some point we sort of finally kind of understood that, they just seem to come and find us,
Uh-huh.
because it's hard for us to pick them out of a crowd, right? It's very hard for us to go, okay, who, is in a business and is looking forward and blah, blah, blah. It's so much easier when they find us, because they can identify us out of the crowd easier than we can them, I think. But that's a challenge, because it's a crowded world out there. How do you get found when there's billions of websites, when there's social media is just a fire hose of stuff, right? Search, they can search for us, but there's so much out there. So it makes it a real challenge. How do you get to, because we know there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there would use us today if they truly knew that we were here to help them and understood what we offered. That's a real challenge to get to them.
Oh yes, and that reminds me of towards the beginning. So right after losing my job with the helicopters, and I was trying to figure out who am I, what is it that I can offer. I've got a wide range of skills how do I tie these together and provide a solution, and to whom do I provide the solution? And at the time, there's this huge crisis going on in Lebanon, and there's capital controls, and people are, the currency is devaluating at an incredible rate. And I've got my friends and family out there that are struggling. And I remember, I've been doing lots of research, lots of reading about, what does it mean? Because I come from an environment where investing is like gambling. And I'm trying, a big part of me coming back to Canada is to kind of change that mentality. A lot of people that I worked with, investing is a lot like speculation. A few of them, and if they're making investments, it's more in the real estate space. So I was looking for that person that could teach me, this is how you do value investing. This is how, don't get swayed by public opinion. Just stick to dollar cost averaging, index funds, that kind of thing. And I had to do so much research, Blaine, just to get back to that simple solution that I just summarized in less than a minute. There's no secret recipe to it. And I figured maybe I could help. I recorded my first YouTube video, and I'm kind of just in Lebanese, just sharing what I've uncovered and how it could help them, what they could do. And I remember, just to practice and understand what is it that they want to hear, I had to do so many phone calls, and I'd spend hours talking to friends and family about, why it's not unsafe to have your money in a brokerage firm, why you can diversify your risk so you don't have to worry about one company failing, why it's not gambling, and how you can avoid it from being gambling. And at the end, I wasn't able to sell them on it. And that's what made me realize that, like you were saying earlier, if you're reaching out, of course, outreach, I'm a big fan of outbound sales, but if you're reaching out and you don't know who your target audience is, you're just using it based off of a list that's available. Well, the chances of success are so slim, and so many entrepreneurs I know pitched their ideas to friends and family and ended up not even starting, just because they're like, well, it doesn't seem like, but it's the wrong audience. So just kind of
Wrong
shifting
group.
that audience is such a huge step, and surviving long enough to be able to get your message out to them, because it is a busy world out there, and marketing can be expensive and misleading.
Yeah. Well, and it's difficult to because we've done that before, where we've got on the wrong. It's like we've said it a million times with our team here is, we're focusing over here and we're working hard and we think we're doing the right things, and then people walk in the back door and buy. Like, where did they come from, right? And so you're trying to go like, well, where are the common threads with the people that come in the back door and keep buying? And we're working our ass off over here, and they keep coming in the back door. They're like, okay, how do we systematize that? How do we ramp that up so that we're getting the right people coming to us. And that's a longer, harder problem in some ways. And it's building the systems and processes that are going to raise the water level as they start working. But it's a challenge. And for us, we go, well, the great thing is people come in the back door and they like us. We just have to figure out how do we shift our attention and help them find us, rather than we're trying to force it over here. We're trying to push over here, and we're feeling the pull from the other side. And how do we switch, and how do we help that cause?
Oh yes, quite the challenge, and it's marketing. Like marketing is such a tricky and such a big world. I remember I was this was still during the oil and gas days. I came across Seth Godin, and
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking maybe I could do his alt MBA instead of doing a full-fledged MBA, and I was just drawn to his ideas. And he has this book which is still a great book. The feedback about it is incredible, and I haven't read it yet, but I've picked up some of the summary points, and it's about tribes. How to build the tribe, and I'm really looking forward, because along Caissa's journey, we've spent so much time trying to understand our offering and who our audience is, that it's quite the relief now that finally I have the time to, we've got a steady offering that we're providing, and at the same time I have some time to learn and grow. I'm not just spending my day
Mm-hmm.
fighting fires and learning new things about the work that needs to get done, or about the new client type that we're servicing, but rather I can do some research about the subjects that I'd like to propel further. I'd like to create more content so that people that follow Caissa and like the way that we think can actually find this information more easily. And along
Mm-hmm.
the way, I was, so that's kind of what we have today. I realized is Caissa, we kind of go against the. So if I were to ask you, Blaine, to niche or not to niche? I kind of already know the answer. We all know the answer, but what is the answer?
I will say something you're probably not expecting me to say here. I think that it's not as clear cut and as black and white as people think. I think there is the prevailing expert opinion screams niche, 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 because it's easy to find your customer and da 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 da. And that can actually, especially for a startup, be dangerous, because you can niche into the wrong niche and
Hmm.
miss the ones that matter. The other thing, like even for us, what we've seen in Dryrun, like we've tried several times going to a very fine niche. And what chases us away from that is the same thing I kind of mentioned before, is that then we have other people coming in the door. And um, it's tricky because we solve a problem that's hard to say we can target a niche, but we solve a problem that's much more horizontal, and it makes it a challenge. And I think one of the dangers, even though I think the advice is just overwhelmingly niche and outbound, is yeah, that might not work. Like you might not really understand your market soon enough if you go down one path. It takes too long to test this path, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. Um, I think there's value to it. I think there's some dangers that business owners, especially new startups, have to be a little bit conscious of, though, as well. What do you think? What do you like?
No,
Did you
I
is that
love
what you're
to hear that.
expecting coming from me?
I love to hear that. And what we offer is also, I'd say, it could serve quite the audience. And we have to transition from this mentality that I think entrepreneurs always have to fight against, because entrepreneurs by nature tend to be problem solvers. They tend to seek the challenge. And I know,
Mhm.
growing up, for me, it was always, well, what is the biggest challenge? Whenever I'm stuck making a decision, I look for the biggest challenge that I'm able to take on. Like, for example, my university degree, I was looking for the more difficult program just so that I could prove that there's no way I could work in the most, like, if I succeeded in the most difficult environment, then there's no reason to think about making a decision because it's going to be the right decision. I'm putting in the most effort. And the same thing happened, just decisions career wise. Should I relax and do something that's more for me, or should I double down and work overtime and go to that construction site and take on that new project and take on the new challenge? And growing up, like, in my 20s, the decision had always been take on the challenge, take on the challenge. And that's been such a difficult um, thing to overcome. That you get to
Mm-hmm.
a point in a company once you've got your business up and running. First of all, you can't get your team to operate in that same environment that you're operating in, where they're always
Mm-hmm.
um, facing a new challenge and learning how to solve problem after problem. So you want to give them that stability, that consistency. So a big
Yeah.
part of it is, yes, finding that balance between, when should I niche and what should I niche into? And when do I stop facing that new challenge at a time? And ideally, I would say, part of the business should always be directed towards research and development, taking on that. So the
Mm-hmm.
majority of the business, or as much as possible, we shouldn't be worried about putting food on the table or about the stability of our employees. Everybody should feel that they are working for the long run. And at the same
Yeah.
time, it's nice to have to be able to dabble with that one client that's on the side of, something new, a big challenge that we want to face, but we can't be dependent on that client. So that's part of my
Mm-hmm.
answer to niching. There's a lot that I'd like to share on that point as well, but we kind of we'll delve into it slowly.
Well, it's. I think there's also this misnomer that finding a niche is always a vertical. That's how people view it. I think a lot of times is it's a niche. Well, it's a vertical. Go for this type of business. It does this and does this and does this. Our niche is a horizontal one. And I think it took us a while to figure that out. Is we cross a lot of sectors, we cross a lot of verticals, but what we help with is this little sort of, basically your cash flow and sales forecasting and scenario modeling to figure out where you're going and evaluate your plans and figure, and keep an eye on your cash flow, of course, and all that. But it isn't like it's across the globe. It's a problem across the globe and all sorts of different industries and verticals. When you I think where we made mistakes is where we pictured a niche as a vertical of a single type of size and type of business and location and everything, where it's like, no, it's not necessarily really the case. And I think sometimes there's this balance between, I think, learning from the experts, but also trusting yourself and trusting what you've learned talking with your customers. And sometimes sort of the expert can give you that shortcut that can really be helpful. And other times they can point you in completely the wrong direction. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's really difficult to understand till later which was which, right?
Oh yes, oh yes. It reminds me of your episode with Mike about expertise to entrepreneurship, I think it was called. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely tough to pick when you can stray away from that consultant's advice and not have to read that 100-page report because you might know better than they do on the specific subject.
Yeah. It's just an ongoing challenge. And like I said, the other side of it is, yeah, but some of them are shortcuts that are just, or some of them are business changing opportunities. And unfortunately, a lot of it is it's the hindsight is 2020 on both counts, right?
Oh yes.
And so I think we just always, especially now, we just keep going back to, we'll just listen to the customers, talk with the customers as much as we possibly can to better understand it and prioritize and see how we can help them, and sprinkle in the other stuff as
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
right? So it's being an entrepreneur is a tough task, right? Because I always say it's like drinking from a fire hose, but it feels like it's drinking from about five of them, and a couple of them are hitting you in the back of the head, and some are coming in the
You gotta
front
pick.
and from the sides, and because they're coming from all these different, it's not like even an even flow, it's like they're coming from all different directions, right? And it's I guess a real discipline to be able to, like, going all the way back to sort of the start here, a little bit of a real discipline to understand and plan, and then be really nimble and test and react and change, as you're dancing on your toes all the time.
Oh yes, oh yes, I could totally relate to that. I love the way that you phrased it, and I would add in this case that, if there is difficulty in decision making, that survival is king, and whatever keeps us in business for a little bit longer. But of course, we want to look out for our mental health, so we can't just be fighting fires day in, day out. So we've got to find that space, even if it means saying no to a client today, even though that client could put food on the table for the next 6 months. If we're able to survive, if we're able to find some kind of funding and then find a way to last those 6 months while working on a vision that we feel confident is going to serve us in a way that's a little bit more repetitive, that's a tough decision that sometimes needs to be made. That saying no and attempting to
Mhm.
really refine the offering in a way that doesn't take up the entrepreneur's time and instead gets the product itself working, or gets the team working on their behalf.
Yeah, that you hit the nail on the head. Is sometimes saying no is the most important thing you can do, and but it's not always clear cut. Uh, Actually, it's rarely clear cut. It's usually a 60-40 from what, it's like, well, there's arguments for both sides, and you just have to find which side does it land on, and be more than willing to say no when it's the wrong move, right? So with Caissa, so what, I want to sort of dive in a little bit on what you're doing today, and how how you got to this point, and how you're helping your clients.
Yes, I appreciate that. With Kaisa, how we got to this point. So basically, e-commerce, I kind of launched into e-commerce and I enjoyed that. I think everybody should have e-commerce on the side, kind of like at some point people didn't trust banks and now everybody has a bank account. I feel like, now everybody has a brokerage account, and I feel like everybody should have a passive income on the side, and why not get an e-commerce store going? Because a few hours a week and you've got that steady passive income and you're learning all these
Mhm.
different tools, marketing, sales, customer service, etc., procurement, tracking, cash flow, accounting. Huge, great, and very, very easy to get into. So I
Mm.
launched that, and soon thereafter, I didn't have the time for it because I started. I had sales and marketing freelancer on my LinkedIn, and somebody reached out to me. At the point, I wasn't aware if they were looking to sell me something or if they were looking to hire me. And yeah, the conversation went great, and we kind of grew, and from creating a sales program to taking on their entire sales cycle to then we realized there were cash flow issues, so we started building those spreadsheets, and then the business started growing. We ended up over 10xing. I don't like, and that's another topic that we could discuss perhaps at some point, but the resisting the vanity metrics is such a challenge. Like believing that,
Yeah.
hey, this counts as success for me. Even if it doesn't count as success for everybody else, I need to celebrate this
Mhm.
win. I don't need to have,
Yeah.
but here, like it's the truth. We achieved the great results, and we grew a team. We went from just being a team of 2-3 people to having 30 full-time equivalents, and the revenue was just rising. So it was and I realized this is what I wanted to be a part of. The same offering that we provided to this company. The company's name is Ditto. Ditto has been acquired now, and I'd like to offer that to others, and I would like
Mhm.
to, and that's what we've been doing. And we tried this ties into the whole niching thing, because like I haven't been able to niche. I've got some clients that are nonprofits, and I've got some clients that are small businesses, and I've got some clients that are larger businesses. And what the way I gauge it is that my mental health is okay. I'm enjoying. I wake up, I get my exercise in, I sign in, I play some music. I've got the time. I'm present with my family and with my partner. So that's
Yeah.
the stuff that counts. And I want to be able to provide that too. I actually learned that from the founder of Ditto, Marquis Murray. It was the first time transitioning from aviation and oil and gas to seeing somebody with a guitar in the background and kids running around. And it's like, this is nice. I want to live like that. So that's kind of how I gauge my success, is that, we're able to serve all of our clients while still feeling good about it. And
Mhm.
now the offering, so we're talking about business strategy, business strategy, as well as coaching the leaders to align their goals, their personal goals with the organization goals, and kind of flow that down to a plan that can be executed operationally. So I've got a partner on the
Mhm.
operations side. Obviously, finance is going to have to play into it. So instead of having to work with and a lot of these companies, sometimes they don't have a full scale. Like, they might have a controller, but they don't have a fractional CFO. So instead, our
Mhm.
fractional CFO, I'm partnered up with SME Works, which is also an Alberta-based company. And, they step in and they understand how I like to work. They understand what to expect from the sales team, since I'm the one that's working with them. And they understand that the same dashboards work. And that it gives such a boost, because we're not reinventing the wheel on any of these fronts. So now we've got me on the strategy, on the sales, as well as on and then you've got SME Works on the finance. We've got on operations, my business partner, Jofia, and from my processes, she's based in Europe. And, so we have these segments now. So instead of niching down and focusing on solving one specific problem, what we've done is we've kind of hacked the system, where we are a partnership of like-minded individuals that solve a problem across a horizontal. I love the way that
Mhm.
you've specified it, and I'd love to work with you a little bit more to refine that better, because we're just kind of moving with what the market is requesting at this point. And the last little addition
Mhm.
to it was on the marketing side. We struggled to find, like, marketing is such a big, scary world. And, like, I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting
Yeah.
that, from such a big world. And you need so many specialists in all the different fields. And, some of them are more data savvy, and others are more creative, and others are more strategic. And I didn't know
Mhm.
that I'd have to get support on all these fronts until helping my clients. You take care of the sales, then the operations need to keep up. And then you can't just keep creating sales manually. You need to get to the marketing side of things. So once we want to
Mhm.
pick up the marketing. And that's where we found, well, we're going to have to partner up with marketing as well and have a marketing arm to Caissa. That goes against what everybody's saying about niching down. We're going in the opposite direction here, but we ended up doing it, and it's going great. And now the marketing arm of Caissa is serving our partners as well as our clients, as well as Caissa ourselves. So
Mhm.
it feels like a good recipe. It feels like we're moving in the right direction.
Well, and again, I think that we've talked a little bit about this, but it feels like you are filling a niche. You're finding people with this problem, with this mindset, and the problem is they need kind of this full package that's integrated and connected together, and I think there's a lot to that, right? I think that that's a bit of the misnomer. Is like a niche is like I said, you go for a vertical and you have like one thing you do. Maybe that's not what the market needs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like sometimes the market needs a pickup truck that can do a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like that's the market, that's the niche. So um, it's interesting, but I can see that because that's businesses, especially now, they can't just go and hire their way out of everything. There
Mm-hmm.
isn't enough money around. The businesses have to run lean, they have to run smart, and and they can get to experts like you guys and have access to basically like high end experienced people that they wouldn't be able to hire.
Mm-hmm.
They just wouldn't be able to hire and bring them into their organization. So no, it's there's a real valuable resource there, and so I credit you guys with doing that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I do have to mention Betty as well, my partner on the business development side and one of my oldest partners in the business. So sorry for skipping that over. I'm sure she'll be listening to this podcast as well. And with regards to what you mentioned, so yes, a lot of times companies can't hire their way out of a problem. A lot of the times, instead of doing that, we go towards software. But software companies are not always looking to solve that specific problem. So we need to find a combination of how much can we solve through hiring and how much can we solve through software, and how to avoid the software that's best marketed in order to go for the software that's the best price point and the best fit. And that's kind of what we're offering now, because we solve the hiring issue by having a team of trained individuals that are scattered all over the globe, so across different time zones
Mhm.
and very affordable price points. So we're able to do that. We're able to match that with having the subject matter experts at the lead of each arm. And instead of a business owner having to deal with a consultant on finance, a consultant on sales, they deal with me at this point. And of course, we're grooming the next stage of somebody who can kind of triage all of this work. And you're getting a small business has the single point of contact for all of these different avenues, and they're able to focus on what they love to do best and work with the team, work with the specialists. And whenever they feel like, all right, we're ready to take this on, Caissa isn't latching on. We want the success story. We want you to say that, hey, we did exactly what you said that we would be able to do. We worked with you, got to the point we're standing up on our own 2 feet. Let us know. We want to tell the world about this. That's kind of what we're going for.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And it's, you've had such a, going back to just all of our conversation, you're such a varied experience from negotiation and sales and all of the things that you understand and on how to make, and like I said, even an e-commerce store, like, yeah, I agree with you. It's so interesting to be able to learn all these fundamentals, right? Is so important. How do people find you if they want to chat with you and learn about you guys?
Yeah, my website, ciaocaissa.com. That's CIAO Caissa.com. And I'll provide some links. My LinkedIn, it's Chris Wehbe, Wehbe. I'll provide the links if you're comfortable sharing those in the podcast. That'd be a great
Absolutely.
help.
Yeah, absolutely. We will. Well, this has been a really fun time, Chris. I know I'm going to take over your whole day here if we keep talking, but this has been super fun. And thanks so much for joining us on the show. And again, I'm Blaine Birch, co-founder CEO at Dryrun. If you're looking for a tool that's going to help you forecast in the future, understand what's happening in your cash flow, your sales, model scenarios, so you're making informed decisions, come and see us at Dryrun, and we'll hook you up. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Blaine.